Hi, this is Ron Edwards, Master Sommelier and Director of Wine Education at Winebow Fine Wine and Spirits. I think we'll have a little fun today. We'll talk about bigger bottles because they're better, right? Yeah, they're better. They're more interesting in a lot of ways. They age better is the easy answer to why you have larger bottles. But I think there's some other things we can talk about that are just as much, if not more fun. The first thing that we want to talk about here is how much fun the names are. Obviously, you would rather have a Magnum than a bottle of wine. Or let's get excited and have a double Magnum. Those are the first two larger formats at 1.5 and then 3 liters. But after that, it gets even more interesting and needs you to understand a little Near East history or maybe a little biblical narrative because they are kings and characters of the Near East. The first two are Jeroboam and Rehoboam, and they were the first two kings of the divided kingdom of Israel, sons of Solomon. After that, we have a dual name for the 6th liter, and sometimes it's called an imperial, and in Champagne, it's called Methuselah. Well, Methuselah is also a biblical character, the longest lived biblical character at 969 years. That's kind of fun and interesting. The next one is actually a king of Syria, Salmanasar, or Shalmaneser is often the other spelling. This was an Assyrian king that actually laid siege to the ancient city of Samaria for 3 years and took captive the northern tribes of Israel. Then there's the Balthazar, and the Balthazar is actually an alternate spelling to a Babylonian king, the last king of Babylon before the Persian Empire took it without anyone firing an arrow. And then after that is a tribute to another Near East king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. And this was a great king of Babylon, the first and the second. The second was responsible for destroying Jerusalem and taking that group of people captive into Babylon. And then last but not least is Solomon. Certainly a well-known king of history, considered the wisest man that ever lived, and certainly one of the richest according to history. And that is the largest bottle you can find at 18 liters. That's quite a lot of wine. So now that you've impressed your friends with all kinds of history and fun names, let's talk about some practical applications of larger bottles. The first one is in hospitality. And the reality is that larger bottles in restaurants have great advantages with larger groups of people. Now, seriously, you could start pulling out Magnums even with 4 people if they're planning to drink 2 bottles of the same wine. But when you start talking about 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 people in a group, a larger bottle is just a far more efficient way to get wine on the table and keep it on the table. And so having large formats around for those is a great idea. The other benefit of that is not only is it more efficient to serve the table, but they get a more consistent experience. Instead of, trying 2 different bottles through 6 people, they actually get the same bottle through 6 people. Or instead of trying 4 different bottles, they might be having a Jeroboam and have 1 bottle. So those are really, it matters in hospitality to get that consistent experience. The final part in hospitality that's really, really important is it's a great show. Pulling out a large bottle of wine, one of these larger formats, and bringing it out to a table, it creates a bit of a moment in time in the dining room. And one way to sell more large format wines is to start selling large format wines, because when other people see it in the dining room, they have a little bit of purchase envy and they think, wow, I'd like to have that experience. When you look at it financially, it's a guarantee of selling multiple bottles. Rather than selling 1 bottle and wondering if they're going to buy a second, if you sell a Magnum, you've automatically sold 2 bottles, and then we'll see what happens from there. In the idea of retail, this gathering of friends at home is a great way for retailers to approach the idea of selling larger format wines, because same idea, it's easier to serve 12 people at home from large bottles of wine, the Magnum, double Magnum concept, than it is from a bunch of small bottles. It's just less work on the host, and it's continuity for the guests. And certainly for those who collect, yes, the wines age evenly. And what happens with the larger format is you end up with a lot more wine with a lot less worry of how much the cork allows oxygen in. So you have a different rate of oxygenation through the cork, which allows the wine to age more slowly and more evenly, and a lot more like it aged before it left the winery, either in tank or in a barrel. And that in of itself is a great value, because you get a different picture of a wine as it's coming to maturity if it came there slower. So those are my arguments for large format bottles. I don't think we have to argue too hard. Most of the wines that we see put in large format bottles are really desirable anyway, and this is a great way to enjoy them in a new way and to get your customers and clients excited about them as well.